Hello, my name is Lizzie Noon. I'm an education officer with WWGS Global Schools. This is part of a training that is done in collaboration with IDGE Business, and in particular to look at the ethics and sustainability cross-cutting issue within the business curriculum, particularly at Leaving Cert level. I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot based on a training that we're rolling out in spring 2025 with IDGE Business. So the learning intentions today are to examine the cross-cutting issue of ethics and sustainability within the business specification, and to look also at the unifying strand through the lens of that theme, and also to investigate how the theme of ethics and sustainability is integrated across other learning outcomes in the four contextual strands, and also to consider the supports and resources that are available. As part of this video, we also have this PowerPoint will be available, and any of the resources available you will find here. So no need to take too many notes. You can find the IDGE materials on 2 of these QR codes if you want to take a picture of that now. So this is an overall view of what the specification is. And as we mentioned today, we're particularly talking about the ethics and sustainability contextual strand, but it's also looking at the other ones and how they fit in then to the different strands. So we will go through number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4, identifying the most relevant crossovers between global citizenship education and these particular strands. Today is just a snapshot. There's a lot more that you can do within your business curriculum as regards global citizenship education. So another thing that's key is the key competencies, which are part of the senior cycle. And certainly there's a great alignment between the values and dispositions and vis-a-vis the benefits of global citizenship education and the key concepts. So as regards values and dispositions, also within global citizenship education, there's a huge focus on values and attitudes, and that forming of critical thinking and critical questioning can help to form positive dispositions in our young students. So who are WWGS Global Schools? And we are Ireland's national programme for global citizenship education within the post-primary setting, and we're fully funded by Irish Aid, which is part of our Department of Foreign Affairs. We also work very closely with the Department of Education as regards their Education for Sustainable Development strategy and various curriculum bodies like the NCCA and IDGE. We're very grateful to be working with IDGE on these collaborations, and we also collaborate with IDGE Science, STEM, Creativity and Geography. So many other departments within IDGE, because we work hard to really show the links between the curriculum and the importance of teaching and learning through a global lens. Our job is to build quality global citizenship education, learning and action, and we do that through mainly teacher training, centralised teacher training, symposia for management, teacher conferences, student conferences, and resources, creating a lot of resources so it's easy to do within the classroom as well. We also support schools on an individual basis to really build their capacity within the school to become global citizenship education schools. And we also have a system of the Global Passport, which is an award that your school can achieve when they have reached certain levels under curriculum, extracurriculum, policy, etc. Global citizenship education equips learners to think critically and to question the world critically and challenge stereotypes, gaining empathy, but also to act responsibly as global citizens. And it's also acting to really make those positive changes that we need to make in the world. And we'll see how we can do that within the business curriculum today. It's also about understanding the root causes of why global injustice and inequality happens. So I'm just going to maybe start off just to kind of get yourselves in the frame of what we mean. And this kind of goes straight for the jugular. And when we're, I suppose, looking at how, what has business got to do with it? This certainly shows it.
Half the world's population live in poverty. These 2.8 billion people worldwide who are living on less than $2 a day could work themselves out of poverty if trade was fair. However, trade is unfair. Take the country of Kenya, for example. In the 1970s, Kenya's future looked bright, with a growing economy and an industry starting to thrive. However, in the 1980s, for the return of aid from rich countries, strict liberalization was enforced. The government had to reduce support for its farmers, cut tariffs, and deregulate markets. And yet, when Kenya wanted entry into the WTO in the 1990s, further liberalization was expected. Cheap, often subsidized goods from richer countries flooded the markets, from shoes and sugar to steel. The result has been fatal for Kenya's young industries, and their vulnerable farmers didn't stand a chance in competition with rich, powerful companies and countries. Moving to the 21st century, Kenya now faces the future with devastated industries, mass unemployment, and a generation without education. More Kenyans live in poverty now than they did in the 1970s. Fewer children go to school, fewer children are vaccinated, and more children die. Around the world, many artisans and producers of products such as cotton, cocoa, coffee, tea, and handcrafts are marginalized due to the regulations put in place by large Western governments. This happens because more than 99% of world trade is conducted by the West, through rich governments and large companies and corporations, including the World Trading Organization and the World Banking Organization. They control the way trade is conducted through agreements and rules that they have created to protect their own interests. Not only do these imposed trade regulations allow cheap products to be dumped on poor countries' fledgling markets, they charge high taxes on imported goods so poor countries can only afford to export raw materials like cocoa and cotton. It is the rich who turn these into more valuable products and reap the rewards. Kenya is not alone. Poor countries only account for 0.4% of global trade. This makes them powerless to fight back. Trade rules need to change. The rules need to allow the 2.8 billion people living on less than $2 a day the chance to work themselves out of poverty.
So, as you can see, there's direct links with a lot of what we speak about in the business curriculum and poverty, injustice, and inequality in the world. Worldwide Global Schools is led by a set of guiding principles, and we summarize those in 5 different areas. It's also about scaffolding your teaching and learning, scaffolding your activities, scaffolding anything to do, I guess, with addressing or trying to address injustice, with good critical thinking and questioning about the world. So unlearning and reconstructing is really about I suppose looking again what are the dominant narratives what we have within the world, looking at statements like there is no alternative. And then reconstructing is really about the imagination and looking what kind of world is possible, where everybody is treated fairly and that we're looking after the planet. So I guess it's like, really like looking at movements like the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, degrowth, and looking at the circular economy and looking at what communities, what governments are doing something differently, but also fostering the creativity and imagination of our students to think differently and to think outside the box when we look at business, when we look at the world and how it works. finding root causes. So really, really asking that question, why and why and why and why. So say a lot of the reasons, as we've seen, for inequality and unfairness in the world are down to things like unfair tax, unfair trade, and unfair debt systems, which have a huge negative impact, and particularly in the global south. The world where sustainability and climate change are so well known is definitely welcome. However, we must not forget human rights within that. So if we are replacing something that may have been looked as unsustainable with something sustainable, we shouldn't necessarily go through the same process of exploitation of people. So a very obvious one is something like lithium, which needs to be mined. We need it for our renewable energy. However, the communities where lithium is being mined, we need to make sure that we're not destroying their environment, not extracting from them, not exploiting them, and giving them a very low price for the lithium that they have available, which is happening right now, and particularly in the lithium triangle of Bolivia, Peru and Argentina, and we've already seen that happen to them as regards their silver mines. So it's just, I suppose, to be very conscious of that our decisions and our long-term decisions do not go through the same process of extraction and exploitation that have been deemed as unsustainable in the past. Making our local to global links. So this is really about the citizenship part of it. So anything that we do within our own communities, and that's whether that's as a citizen or a consumer, to make sure that we do the right thing, that we're not part of that system that extracts and exploits. It's fairly impossible to do it completely, but it's seeking out ways in which we do things within our own communities and ensuring that it doesn't have an effect or a negative effect on our global friends around the world. So likewise, it's really like seeing, I suppose, the relevance as well of some of the global issues we speak about in our local environment. Acting in solidarity. So this is really about the type of actions we take. So in business, I guess corporate, like very good corporate social responsibility, will see a change in supply chains, a change in systems to allow for better treatment of people, say, and employees, and better treatment of the environment, and not just an add-on of, like, maybe throwing a few quid towards an NGO or whatever. So we need to look at, like, I suppose, people equally and not benefactors, and we're the grateful receiver and the donor of those money. So it's not to avoid completely charities, but it's really to scaffold maybe some, if you happen to be doing fundraising, that you scaffold it well. And maybe it's back to that why question of why are you fundraising? Who is it for? Why is fundraising needed in the first place? Why are charities needed as well? So you need to get into that conversation. But it's also looking at all the different actions that you can take. We can influence policy of companies and of the government, etc., without chaining ourselves to it all. It can be about a healthy conversation, and it is about, as I said, that questioning of the world, and that can be a very solid action. The students can raise awareness of a certain issue maybe that they're talking about within their business classroom, and I suppose, like, even working with their school community in solidarity with people around the world and our neighbours around the world can be really effective and empowering as well to young people. So when we're looking at unlearning and reconstructing from the business point of view, this is a really good, I suppose, graph I think it's a very good graph from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. And they are really, really good, I suppose, at collecting, it's from a paper that they have of business in the well-being economy. And they've gathered government and business evidence and case studies to really look at what business would look like in if we put well-being at the very, very center of our economies. So on the left-hand side, you'll see just a few examples of, I suppose, what the majority of businesses look like now, and then what they could look like if we employed a more kind of well-being centered approach to business as well. So if we look at, like, say, short-term mindset, would be thinking like of short-term profit possibly, but a long-term mindset might look at sustainability and look at on how the business, first of all, can survive through a time period, but also it is about like that you're not, that say the source of your, if it was a product, that the source of your materials was not finite, and that would employ, like, say, the circular production, so that anything that's going in, rather than it being like disposal at the end of it, and then the consequences around that. So hence creating externalities like pollution. So how can we also use all of that energy that we possibly can, and conserve energy that we're and I think what really, really important, and particularly when we get to employment and looking at employment in the business curriculum, that we will not treat people like a cost on the balance sheet, but treat them like an asset. And I think this is really key to how we do business in the world today. As much as the environmental and the sustainability element is at the forefront of every business nowadays, we do have to look at this part and remember that sustainability is not only about environmental sustainability, it is about social, and it is about cultural, and it is about economic sustainability. We have to do our best to avoid any type of greenwashing, which people are very aware of. So one activity that you could do with your students, or in the purposes of today, we're just looking at different examples from schools and what they're doing. So I'm going to share a couple of those with you now. So we have later on, you'll see a video by Colóiste Joseph in Kilmarnock, and there their students study ethics already, and corporate social responsibility and financial injustices, and the circular economy in their Leaving Cert business already. In Hansfield Educate Together, all the 5th and 6th year students review the consumption of products and commodities, and looking at international trading barriers, but also within Unit 6 of the existing course, they complete a 2-week country fact file. So looking at GDP, but also looking at other measures of success rather than GDP, looking at the gross national happiness index, looking at the human development index, looking at the sustainability index. So looking at different indices in order to see what the measure of success in a country is. And this can be very, very useful for us kind of looking maybe at the future and on how we run societies and business in the future. So the unifying strand, it's about investigating business, and it's designed to be woven into the contextual strands as appropriate. So what does that look like from a global citizenship education point of view, and how can global citizenship education and Worldwide Global Schools help with that? So I guess probably the easiest way to do that is by looking at the learning outcomes themselves, and definitely, say, developing questions to research. We can definitely help with that. So really global citizenship education is based on a lot of really, really good inquiry questions. We have one model called the Digging Deeper model. So it would look at, say, power structures. It would look at where we get our information from, say, our sources of information. It would look at, like, you know, what the future would look like. So this Digging Deeper model is used as a way, I suppose, as a set of inquiry questions that you could use with anything. So say maybe a case study on a business or a video, etc., or a project that the students are doing themselves. Say then when we looked at kind of managing information, so a key part of global citizenship education is a variety of perspectives. So being allowed to have that variety of perspectives. So we would look to, say, really, really good, well-researched publications like the New Internationalist, like Upstream, like The Guardian, etc. So, but also from publications from the Global South in particular, and looking at, like, you know, how people, not only, I suppose we always say history is written by the winners, so looking at, like, you know, the losers and what do they say, and particularly in the business world. Our colleagues in 8020 stroke developmenteducation.ie have a really good resource and a set of workshops called Facts Matters, and it really, really looks at reputable sources, digital media literacy, and really kind of opens the students' eyes to the importance of having factual information. And I guess because, you know, what we say in global citizenship education has to be so, so robust and based on truth, that we are a very, very well-researched sector. So project planning, having a very kind of long-term vision is really, really key for the students as well, and analysing the decisions that are made. So it's allowing time for so all of the critical thinking and questioning that happens within GCE can really lend to this. Because when we are looking at global justice issues, a lot of the time they're quite complex. So we're always looking at, you know, really, really creative ways of presenting those findings. So you will find some really good organizations that are really have social justice and equality at their very heart. Like, information is beautiful, but there's some really, really good ways in which we display information about very, very serious topics. So there's lots, I suppose, of resources as regards that. As a former employee of the Concerned Debates, acknowledging sources and, you know, ensuring a variety of sources and reputable sources is very, very close to my heart. And I know that the Concerned Debates would have some really good materials on this, on how you can investigate that with students. So I guess it's like, you know, the way just even that piece of, like, you know, between the Facts Matter resource and Concerned Debates, you'll find that the GCE community have a lot that they can offer as regards to unifying strand. So just, I suppose, one thing that we are going to look at, and one thing that you could look at with your students, is maybe taking a product, something like a mobile phone or chocolate maybe, and having a look at what, so it's not necessarily the marketing life cycle of a product that we'd be used to looking at from a business point of view, but it's actually looking at the exact, like, exactly the product itself, from the materials extraction. So like a mobile phone, you would look at cobalt, you would look at lithium, which you would look at copper, and all the components that make up a mobile phone, where they come from. Usually, and particularly with cobalt, very unregulated industry where people get very, very little money. The conditions that they work under are usually fairly horrific. And yet, when we think about the end product and the mobile phone itself, where the profit is made, how much profit is made. That's not really seen by those who extract the materials for us. So when they're processed, obviously, and the manufacturing usually takes place and does take place outside the countries that it's extracted from. And during the manufacturing process, we have to be also very aware of planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. So first of all, we can't really fix it unless it's a fair phone. That it's made not to last, but also our perceived obsolescence would be we need a new one of these, even if it's not broken, because we need the latest model. Packaging and transportation obviously has its carbon footprint within that as well. And again, back to is its useful life, whether it's a perceived or just plainly breaks down. And then its end of life, where does it go? So we are a lot better at recycling mobile phones, and there's some really, really good recycling centers. But then, do we really know where the phones are going? So there's a huge problem in, say, countries like Ghana, where a lot of our electronic waste is dumped. Now, fair enough, the argument is obviously there's been a business made out of that as well, and people who process that on the other side, the Ghanaian people have been able to kind of make a business out of it. However, it's too much when you consider that they also have secondhand clothes dumped on them as well. So we really need to consider where our waste is going, from our plastic bottles to our phones to our clothes. Our waste is being dumped on communities that really don't have the facilities to be able to process them as well. So this is where our conversations can come up then about, say, the circular economy, and see what components can we recycle as well, and what can we do without unnecessarily extracting and continuing to extract and exploit. That's just purely unsustainable, and we won't be able to keep that going. So we really need to find other ways of doing things. It's a very useful exercise, not only for the business classroom, but for students to realise. And we have templates. So just ask us here in Worldwise, or you'll be able to find them on our website, and lesson plans based around this particular one. So let's get down and dirty with all of our strands. So if we look at, say, strand one, so I've highlighted, I suppose one of the part of strand one that I've chosen to highlight here is the influence of national and EU policy. Now, as you've already seen from the Kenyan example in our video, there is a huge amount of trade barriers and tax rules and that have been quite preventative of, say, if we look at our last product, the mobile phone, say, like the manufacturing of a mobile phone would never take place in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where a lot of our cobalt comes from, for instance. Our cocoa, and most of our cocoa is grown in West Africa. However, the very farmers and the very processors of that cocoa are only allowed to send the raw materials. So that's like another way, an intricate web of, policies and laws and legislation that allows the profit to be in Europe and not necessarily in West Africa, where our cocoa was made, for example. Now, one of the legal instruments, I suppose, I would like to, I could bring up several that have a negative effect on our inequality, and I have a negative effect on our equality, and a negative effect on how fair the world is. But one that I really would like to highlight in a very positive way is in the summer of 2024, when the right to repair movement effectively changed the legislation for repairing as an EU legislation. So the right to repair legislation, after a huge amount of civil society pressure, especially from the Right to Repair campaign, of whom the Rediscovery Centre here in Ireland are part of. And the new legislation is great news for our many repair businesses. So you can see there, Repair My Stuff, and our repair community. So it's a good directory there of everybody who repairs. And it's also good news for consumers and for the greater good, to reduce the amount of stuff that we unnecessarily are producing and consuming. So it means that companies must offer repair instead of just offering a new product. And it also kind of stipulates that there is financial incentives, like repair funds or reduced VAT rates, so that an economic boost for repair is given, and member states have to put in place at least one policy measure to improve the affordability of repairs. There is a recognition of community-led repair initiatives and community-based repair efforts, including repair cafes and online platforms as well that offer repair. But however, there is, as always with legislation and policy, there is a few shortcomings. It only really applies, and this legislation only really applies for those existing eco design firms. So the broader legislation covering other product categories is still needed in the next legislative term. And the new feature of the policy is a provision that requires that spare parts are made available at a reasonable price. So that's still quite vague. But I think what the movement and the repair campaign have continued to focus on is maybe the way a reasonable price means less than 33% of the price of a new product. So there's still quite a lot to do, but I suppose the Right to Repair Europe and the wider campaign and the countries working together would look at, would say that planned obsolescence plays a huge role in our unsustainable consumption and production. And just in this particular strand as well, we look at environmental, social and governance factors, and I suppose how they apply as well to the business world. So, yeah, and I guess when we're looking at frameworks, and businesses are expected to report their performance and progress under these three pillars: so environmental, social and governance. So is there any other, you might think of your own kind of legislation that has been positive, but as I said, I could certainly focus on the negative effect here as well. So I guess when we think of what are another part of strand one that we look at is maybe looking at the positives and the negatives. So what you could do is with your students is maybe just have a look. They can work in groups, they can do a Mentimeter on what are the positives and negatives of globalization. But one really good resource I'd like to mention now, it's from the non-formal sector, it's from the National Youth Council, and it's Globalization, the Youth and the Truth. And the activities are really just fabulously laid out. It's the type of resource you can use basically that you could pick up 5 minutes before your class and use some of the activities in it. And they're very interactive, very youth friendly. And I think they would be really amazing to use within your classroom. Anyway, they kind of lay it out, I guess, they have a kind of good graph around kind of who are the winners and the losers as regards globalization. And then say in developing countries, it would be the middle class would be the winners, the poorest 5% obviously would be the losers in developed countries. So that's us. The 16th richest country in the world, the winners would be the richest 1%, and the losers would be workers in labor-intensive sectors. But I think almost you could include all of us in that, and all of us workers as well. And yeah, so it just kind of has a quick snapshot. But I guess that, you know, if we look at, say, the negatives, first of all, of globalization, what I would, from a global citizenship education point of view, we'd look at globalization as not protected labor, environmental, or human rights. International bodies like the World Trade Organization infringe on national and individual sovereignty, unbalanced development, and neo-colonial systems have taken place. Cultural sameness and homogeny has also presented itself. It empowers multinational corporations, and for somewhat has taken, I suppose, which will be is spoken about quite a lot in Inequality Inc., a report by Oxfam, their latest report on inequality, is that they have more power now than states themselves. There has been increased racism and the spread of materialistic lifestyle and attitude, are, I suppose, some to name a few. But I guess, like, our, you know, the positive side of it, as well, a massive part of global citizenship education is never that it's one or the other, that you see both sides. There's increased cultural awareness, it broadens access to goods and services, it has the potential to lift people out of poverty, not that it's happened. There has been increased trade, but it needs to be done the right way, I guess. And then I guess, like, you know, the way in movement building, has been made easier by communications. Like, say, I would be part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and I would work with colleagues from all over the world, and we're all kind of working together towards a movement of, like, putting well-being at the center of the economy. So just maybe a little break to have a look at, I'd mentioned Colossus Joseph Kilmallock earlier on just what they are doing in their classroom, and also what the students are bringing.
Hello, Leaving Cert business teachers. We're here to show how sustainability can fit perfectly into your Leaving Cert classes and why it's so important. Sustainability is about meeting today's needs whilst protecting the future by balancing people, the planet, and profit. Let us walk you through some ideas and resources to get started.
Topics we'd love to learn about in class. Sustainable development goals. Carbon footprint in business. Green branding. Circular economy. Sustainable sourcing.
One great idea is to have a map in class showing where products are made. It's an eye-opening way to talk about carbon footprints, global supply chains, and the journey of goods we use every day.
Now let's talk about resources. These are some of our top picks for making sustainability easy to teach. Worldwide's Global Schools provides resources on sustainability and global issues such as lesson plans and workshops. Winning and Catalyst offers lessons on topics such as eco-friendly business practices, green marketing, and the SDGs. Financial Justice Ireland has case studies and workbooks that explore the link between financial systems and sustainability. And developmenteducation.ie is a database covering almost every sustainability topic. With these resources, you will never run out of materials to add depth and make your class engaging.
Sustainability isn't just about big ideas, it's about taking risks and actions. These resources can help you teach topics like reducing waste, green advertising, and supporting communities, while all linking them back to real business activities.
Hello, Leaving Cert business teachers.
So thank you very much to the students of Colossus Joseph who put that together, especially for you, and particularly to their teacher, Brian Callagher. So moving on swiftly to strand 2 and understanding enterprise. So as you can see there in the business planning section, it's looking at the outline the importance of ethics and sustainability when planning a business. So I've several different models here that we can go through. I've already mentioned the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which has great kind of evidence on where communities, governments and businesses are taking steps towards making their businesses more sustainable. The same could be said for the businesses and the enterprises involved in the Buena Vivre movement of South America's rethinking of the future that we want. So when you look at any kind of, like, I suppose, proposed new system or business model, you will find, like, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to do with business. It could be a movement like degrowth, like the donut economics. It will like have a really, really good look at how we maybe need to do business differently. We're not complete idealists and thinking that, you know, business is business, and it can't turn a profit. But like, let's look at the true cost, not just in monetary terms, and how can we use our imagination and use our creativity to come up with a way that people can have really, really good livelihoods with their businesses without compromising, as I said, human rights or compromising our environment. So one really, really good model of kind of looking at the world come up by Kate Raworth would be donut economics, which does look at the circular economy and it looks at the planetary boundaries, but it also within that it looks at the social foundation. So looking both at the same time, which I think is a really, really important message for when we're looking at sustainability and ethics within our business curriculum. So I guess from the Wellbeing Economy Alliance point of view, it would consider businesses that are ethical and sustainable to do the following: to produce durable, fixable, safe, ethically sourced goods, provide services based on care and responsibility, offer dignified employment that allow workers to live without stress, allow employees to have a say in how the company is run. That could go beyond that and possibly having employees as shareholders, having employees on the board of management, etc. So looking at the governance, again, it's back to the ESG of our strand 1, like how companies are governed is as much as part of their sustainability as, you know, being environmentally friendly, are aware of their environmental impact and their regeneration of ecosystems when they operate all along the product life cycle. Give back to communities in which they operate as well, which is done slightly these days with most businesses, but, like, you know, how do we really, really embrace that? Pay proper tax in the country that they operate in all along the product life cycle. So a good example of that would be like copper in Zambia. They're really, really, it's one of our biggest copper sources in the world. Same could be said for Chile. However, there's a really, really very inventive and creative way of avoiding tax there as well. So the local people really don't benefit from the copper that's mined there. Produce and provide for one another in a way that promotes human flourishing on a healthy planet. It's as simple as that. So here are a few examples of maybe what businesses that are doing that. So we have Ethical Origin as a small chocolate and coffee business that works between Colombia and Ireland. And all the profits go to the communities in Colombia. But what has been really interesting about that organization is that it's actually really trying to work with the communities. It is run by Colombians living in Ireland. And I guess kind of changing business models and things like that. And actually they're working with farmers who originally would have been involved with the illegal products, should I say, in Colombia, and now kind of moving them into kind of like a coffee and chocolate growing and manufacturing. So it's like, unlike the other product, it's not just the raw materials, everything is done in Colombia, and what the ethical origin are doing is just, you know, providing that link with Ireland. Same with Moi coffee, the manufacturing is done in Ethiopia. Our coffee comes from Ethiopia in the first place. So it's kind of going beyond those models of fair trade and the Rainforest Alliance, which are still really good because they're going towards that way. However, it's taken that next step where the profit actually stays with the people who are growing it. Fair phone is where all of the components of the phone are ethically sourced, but also you can fix your phone. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't have the big budgets that most phone companies have, so it hasn't really become mainstream, but we do need to look at how we can make, you know, products like this a little bit more mainstream. But then that, again, it's back to, I mean, being part of the movements like the right to repair that can change legislation as well. And it's not, as I said, it's about kind of like, you know, investigating that with your students, and exploring that and thinking how we can do it. Our own Indigenous organisation here, Food Cloud, have been really, what a great business model coming from, it's totally inspirational, of two young business students who recognized a problem like food waste and recognized also a social problem like homelessness, and said, what can we do about these and how can we use our business heads to do it? So Food Cloud are now, like, you know, the way linking up food waste from companies directly to non-profit organizations. But not only that, they have created another business where they're providing catering that's using the waste product, and then being able to, like, you know, provide employment, etc. So I guess it's kind of like those are really, really inspirational. So another thing you could do, and again, it's about fostering that imagination, and it's looking at business planning, would be to look at, like, you know, the way, okay, you're setting up your own business and giving students the freedom to have a blank page and don't look at that kind of the barriers that they may come across. And what would your business look at, like, again, kind of employing the life cycle of the product, etc. So again, we would look at maybe, you know, this is a reminder as well of what kind of things would be in your business as well. So let them go mad. So whether it's business or enterprise, to be able to do that. So also, I guess just to kind of look back on, so the report Inequality Inc., it's some really, really good information there. And it also points towards what we can do as well as regards our business, and how businesses can change in order to like, you know, the way obliterate, I suppose, inequality as well in the world. So there's some tips within that as well. So they have 3 key tips here. So characteristics of hybrid and equitable business models would be to share their profit among shareholders rather than concentrating among capital providers. Power involves stakeholders in dialogue and decision making, and to achieve social goals through entrepreneurial means. Because the way it is that, like, for women's unpaid care within society, and also out of more than 1,600 of the largest companies in the world, only 24% have a public commitment to gender equality, just from a gender equality point of view. So finally, or not finally, strand 3, leading and managing people. So looking at the range of factors that impact on workforce planning, and looking at the significance of ethics in workforce planning, to include equality and diversity and inclusion. So one really, really good activity that you can find in Not Business as Usual, which is by Financial Justice Ireland, is the Race to the Bottom activity. So having like a positive disposition to that and look at employees as assets and not as expenses. So again, I think it was mentioned at the very start when we looked at that graph. So the scenario is that a multinational corporation is coming to set up a factory in your country, and you have to rank the things that there's 2 rights that you need to get rid of, and there's two rights that you're not willing to give up. So you can work in groups, you can use it as a ranking game, you can do it. It's just, I guess, to get the students to think about, you know, should we give up? And maybe just a question, maybe all of these things that probably should be standard within employment terms and conditions, and how much sometimes that we're willing to compromise as a result of them. And there's a really good set of inquiry questions with that as well. So strand 4, being informed. So looking at the importance of ethics and sustainability, including the consequences of participation in the shadow economy, and then how consumers contribute to the circular economy. So they should be able to demonstrate how consumer behavior might be informed by ethical and sustainable concerns, which they completely are. So can you think of some examples of how consumer behavior has changed? And it definitely has changed with people seeking out more sustainable products. Also some really, really nice, oh my God, tons of examples of schools setting up their own businesses, carrying, whether that's, you know, from a clothes swap that they have on a day, or establishing an app where, like Depot or Vinted, where it's like, you know, they're selling on pre-loved clothes, for example. So it's kind of looking towards that, like, you know, and again, that creativity where, you know, a viable business can still be made, but it's using what we have and not unnecessarily producing more stuff. You know, the consumer part can take place, and that's, you know, and that's within that ethical space. So I guess there's several toolkits that we would recommend. Obviously, we have a business for the junior cycle, but these ones might be a little bit more relevant to your senior cycle curriculum. So it's quite old, but really, really good, by Troca, The Business of Food, Who Makes the Rules. I mentioned already Globalization, The Youth and the Truth. Just Tax, really, really good education toolkit from Financial Justice Ireland. Accounting for Justice. Proudly Made in Africa is an organisation which really encourages the trade of manufactured goods, particularly from Africa, and Not Business as Usual, from the Financial Justice Ireland as well. We also have resource sheets and recorded CPDs on like relevant topics and global justice issues to the business curriculum, like fast fashion, child labour, degrowth and sustainable economies, trade justice and tax justice. So I guess it's, you know, if there's something that you're particularly interested in bringing into the business curriculum, get in touch with us. We'll definitely be able to point you in the right direction. There isn't a shortage of resources out there, whether they're resources themselves, even like something like this, like the report is so rich, I suppose, in information. And I guess I'll kind of leave you with this quite stark statistic of that the 5 richest men have more than doubled their wealth since 2020. Why 5 billion people were made poorer. This is really this shouldn't happen. And I think business has a huge role to play in a very, very positive way. So I guess on how we do business, is really, but I think, maybe the larger corporations can learn from those smaller organizations who are doing the right thing. The world's 5 largest corporations combined are valued at more than all of the GDPs of Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. So we saw one of the kind of short films at the very start, and one of our kind of action verbs as part of this curriculum is to evaluate and use our ethical judgment. So one really, really simple one is the impossible hamster, which looks at, I suppose, our unrealistic look at growth as a measurement of success. The story of stuff, particularly the story of electronics, maybe if we're looking in that frame. So all of their videos are really, really amazing and very relevant to young people. There's plenty of videos on tax havens, etc. And one video called The Rules. And then from, I suppose, looking at the reconstructing and different movements, lots of material from as I said, the Wellbeing Economy Alliance.
Lots of wealthy individuals.
So recommended websites. I suppose one key economist that we follow is Jason Hickel, but there's several others that would be really, really well recommended, and particularly those who are interviewed on the Upstream podcast, which is an economic podcast about, I suppose, questioning the world. The New Internationalist magazine, very, very good. They had a really, really good edition on climate capitalism edition. So looking at partners for the new economy, the London School of Economics obviously has been really fantastic. Financial Justice Ireland, really, they have a series called Con What, and economics in plain English, and also Donut Economics website as well, where you can find loads of educational resources. As I said, Upstream, The Empire Files, The Secret World of Investor Court, say, Reversing Climate Change is really good for just really new and exciting things that businesses are doing to address climate change and that reboot. So definitely connect in with us and connect in with IDGE. And thank you so much for your time today. We're delighted that you can make it. And yeah, remember, we can, in a positive way, if you'd like to evaluate this, even if you didn't get to attend the course, please do. Thank you so much for your time. See you soon.